That's what the ranch hands whispered when they thought Amos Hargrove couldn't hear. And they were right. 20,000 acres of Texas grassland, more cattle than a man could count in a week, and enough money to buy half of San Antonio. But the dust kept swirling, restless as the wind that carved through the canyon walls. Amos stood on the ridge overlooking his empire, one boot propped against the weathered fence post. 38 years old. Not a single gray hair yet, though his face wore lines deeper than the Rio Grande. The September sun hammered down on his wide-brimmed hat, casting shadows across features that might have been handsome if they ever softened. They never did. Boss, his foreman, Tucker, rode up the slope, his mare's hooves kicking up that ever-present dust. Cookie's done quit. Left this morning with the supply wagon. Amos didn't turn. What did I do this time? Said you threw a biscuit at his head. Biscuit was hard as a rock. Prove my point. Tucker shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. That's the third cook in 4 months. Word spreading. No one wants to work for a man who what? Amos finally looked at him, those slate-gray eyes cold as December. Tucker knew better than to finish that sentence. I'll post notices in town. Someone will bite. Better bite quick. I'm tired of jerky and beans. As Tucker rode off, Amos turned back to the vista. His land, his cattle, his fortress, his prison. The memory came unbidden, the way they always did when he stood too long in one place. 17 years old at the barn dance, Sarah Mae Pritchard's hand in his, her laugh like bells. The way she'd looked at him with those doe eyes and promised forever. Then the morning he'd caught her in Jacob Turner's arms, her laughter turning cruel when she saw his face. Did you really think I'd marry a poor ranch hand? She'd said. Jacob's got money. You've got dirt under your nails. He'd built the lone spread brick by brick, cow by cow, proving her wrong with every acre he claimed. But the victory tasted like ash. He'd touched plenty of things in his life. Rough rope, cold iron, hot blood when the Comanche raids came through. But a woman? Not since Sarah Mae's betrayal. Not once. His ranch hands thought him strange. Some called him silent for how little he spoke. Others just called him mean. But they stayed because he paid well, and because crossing Amos Hargrove was like spitting into a twister. The ranch house sprawled behind him. 10 rooms, most of them empty. No curtains on the windows. No rugs on the floors. Just bare necessities and the kind of silence that could suffocate a man if he let it. He didn't let it. He worked. Dawn to dusk, then past dusk until his body demanded sleep. That was the rhythm. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. No variation. No surprise. No life. She arrived on a Thursday with a wagon full of secrets. Amos was shoeing a mare when Tucker brought her around. He heard the wagon wheels first, then Tucker's voice doing that nervous thing where he talked too fast. Boss, this here's Clara Delaney. She's your new cook. Amos looked up from the mare's hoof, and for a moment, just a flash, the world tilted. Red hair. Not auburn, not strawberry blonde. Red, like Arizona clay in sunset, braided and pinned beneath a worn hat. She wore a simple dress the color of wheat, practical boots, and an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Ma'am. He dropped the mare's hoof, straightened, didn't remove his hat. Mister, need someone who can make food fit to eat. I can do that. Last 3 couldn't. Last 3 weren't me. Something sparked in those green eyes of hers. Challenge, maybe, or just exhaustion with men who thought cooking was easy work. Amos felt his jaw tighten, that familiar defense mechanism sliding into place. You know how to handle a kitchen in the middle of nowhere? He asked. I've cooked on trail drives from here to Montana. Fed 50 men with nothing but a fire and a cast iron skillet. Your fancy ranch house kitchen should be no trouble at all. Tucker coughed. She's a widow, boss. Lost her husband on the Chisholm Trail 2 years back. Clara's face went hard as fence posts. Don't need my sob story told for me. Thanks. Amos respected that. He gave a curt nod. Kitchen's through the back. Rooms upstairs, 3rd door on the left. You cook 3 meals a day, keep the pantry stocked. I don't tolerate waste, laziness, or sass. And I don't tolerate thrown biscuits, temper tantrums, or men who think they can intimidate me. She climbed down from the wagon without assistance, started unloading crates with efficient movements. We understand each other? Tucker's eyes went wide. Nobody talked to Amos Hargrove like that. But Amos felt something strange in his chest. A flutter, like a trapped bird. We understand each other just fine. Dinner that night changed everything and nothing. The hands filed into the bunkhouse mess, But Tucker brought Amos's meal to the main house as always. The boss ate alone. That was the rule. Except this time, when Tucker set the plate down, Amos just stared. "What is this?" "Dinner." "I can see that." "What's in it?" asked the lady. "She made it." Spicy chili, red as sin, steam rising with the scent of cumin and something else, chipotle maybe. Cornbread on the side, golden and cracked with butter melting into the fissures. Amos's stomach growled like a wolf. He took a bite, then another. Then he set his fork down and pressed his palms flat against the table, because if he didn't, he might have done something foolish like gone to the kitchen to thank her. The food was perfect. Not just good, perfect. Every spice balanced, every texture right. It reminded him of his mother's cooking before the fever took her, back when food meant love instead of fuel. He finished the plate, all of it, mopped up the chili with the cornbread and sat back, feeling something dangerous bloom in his chest. Satisfaction, comfort, weakness. Clara came through the door as he was rinsing his plate. Another rule, cleaning up after himself. "Meal acceptable?" she asked. It was adequate. Adequate. She crossed her arms. "You licked the plate clean. Didn't want to waste." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Breakfast is at dawn. Don't throw anything at my head." She left before he could respond. And feeling something else too. Something he couldn't name but recognized from 17 years ago, before the world taught him better. Hope. Clara cooked. Amos ate. They circled each other like cautious animals, maintaining distance but always aware. She left his meals on the table at exact times. He left payment in an envelope by the stove. No contact necessary. But the food kept getting better. Venison stew with dumplings light as clouds. Apple pie with cinnamon so perfect it made his teeth ache. Roasted chicken with herbs he couldn't name but dreamed about. "Boss is actually smilin' at dinner," once said. "Ain't smilin'," Amos growled. "Got indigestion." But they knew. And worse, he knew. 2 weeks in, Clara started eating dinner in the kitchen while he ate in the dining room. Just a wall between them. But Amos found himself listening to the small sounds. Her fork against the plate, the rustle of her dress, the soft sigh she made after the first bite. She was tasting her own cooking, finding it good. One night, he spoke through the doorway without planning to. "Your husband was a lucky man." Silence. Then, "He died thinking so." "How'd it happen?" "You want the truth or the story I tell strangers?" "Truth." Lightning spooked the herd outside Abilene. James tried to turn them. Got caught in the middle instead. They found him the next morning. Her voice stayed steady, matter of fact. "I kept cooking. Had to. Was the only thing I knew how to do that made sense." Amos stared at his half-eaten stew. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He died doing what he loved. Not everyone gets that." "What about you? What do you love?" The question surprised them both. Clara appeared in the doorway, wooden spoon in hand, those green eyes studying him like he was a puzzle missing pieces. "I used to love cooking for someone who appreciated it," she said slowly. "Used to love the look on James's face when I'd make his favorite meal. Loved feeling useful. Needed." She tilted her head. "What about you, Mr. Hargrove? What do you love?" The honest answer was nothing. He loved nothing because loving meant losing, and he'd learned that lesson well. But something about her direct gaze made him want to try. "I love this land," he said finally. "Only thing that never betrayed me. Land can betray you. Drought. Flood. Fire. Then it's the only thing that's honest about it." Clara's expression softened, just a fraction. "That's the saddest thing I've heard all week." She went back to her meal, leaving Amos alone with his thoughts and his stew gone cold. The hands started talking around the third week. "Boss is sweet on the cook," Red Willie announced in the bunkhouse, loudly enough that the words carried across the yard. Amos was checking fence posts nearby. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "Nah," Dusty Jack countered. "Boss don't get sweet on nothing. Man's got ice in his veins. I seen him watch her hang laundry yesterday. Stood there for 10 minutes, just staring at. She's got a figure worth staring at." Amos's hands tightened on the fence post. He should have walked away. Should have let them have their gossip and moved on. Instead, he strode into the bunkhouse like judgment itself. The conversation died. 6 ranch hands suddenly found their boots fascinating. "Any of you have something to say about Miss Delaney?" Amos said quietly. "You say it to my face. And then you pack your gear." "Boss, we didn't mean." "I don't care what you meant. That woman works hard, minds her business, and deserves respect. Next man who says otherwise can find work elsewhere." "We clear," mumbled agreements. Amos left them to stew in their shame, but his heart hammered. Not from anger, from fear. Listened for her footsteps, her humming, her presence. And that terrified him more than any Comanche war party. Clara confronted him that evening. She found him in the barn, currying his stallion with rough, angry strokes. The horse snorted, uneasy. "Heard you threatened to fire your whole crew," she said without preamble. "They were disrespectful. They were gossiping. Men do that. Not about you." Clara stepped closer, and Amos forced himself not to retreat. She smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke. Why? Why what? The question hung in the dusty air between them. Amos kept brushing the horse, focusing on the rhythmic motion instead of her eyes. "You work for me," he said finally. "Your reputation reflects on this ranch." "Horseshit." He stopped brushing, looked at her. "Excuse me. I said horseshit, Mr. Hargrove. You don't care about this ranch's reputation. You care about—" She stopped herself, shook her head. "Never mind. Say it. Don't." Her voice cracked like a whip. "Don't use my first name unless you mean it. And don't defend my honor unless you're willing to explain why you're defending it." They stood 3 feet apart, but it felt like miles. Amos's hands trembled. He shoved them in his pockets. Clara studied him with those two seeing eyes, then sighed. "I found something in the pantry. Old locket, stuck behind the flour sacks. Has a picture inside. It was mixed in with the supplies. I wasn't snooping." The gold caught the lamplight. "Pretty girl. Looks expensive. Give it here." "The woman who made you like this?" Clara's voice softened. "The reason you never smile? Never let anyone close." Amos snatched the locket, his fingers brushing hers. The contact lasted a second, maybe less, but it burned like a brand. "Her name was Sarah May," he heard himself say. "We were engaged. She left me for a richer man. Said I'd never amount to anything. So you built all this to prove her wrong." "Yes. And when you did, was it enough?" The question gutted him. Because no, it hadn't been enough. Would never be enough. You couldn't fill a hollowed-out heart with land and cattle and money. "I've never touched a woman since," he said, the confession ripping out of him. "Not once. Told myself I didn't need it, didn't want it. Built walls high enough that no one could scale them." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Sounds lonely." "It's safe. Same thing sometimes." She turned to leave, but Amos's voice stopped her. "Clara." "Yes. Thank you. For the meals. For everything." She glanced back, and something in her expression made his chest ache. "You're welcome, Amos." She used his first name. He let her. The rustlers came on a moonless night in October. Amos woke to gunshots and the sound of cattle bellowing. He grabbed his rifle, barely got his boots on before running into the yard. The hands poured from the bunkhouse, armed and confused. "Rustlers," Tucker shouted. "Southwest pasture." They rode hard, Amos in the lead, but the thieves had a head start. 20 head of prime cattle, driven toward the canyon where darkness would swallow them whole. Then a rifle crack split the air from the ranch house. Amos wheeled his horse around and saw Clara on the porch, his spare Winchester in her hands, firing at the riders trying to flank them from behind. "What the hell? Shut up and ride," she shouted, taking aim again. 2 more shots. One rustler fell from his horse. The others scattered, their ambush ruined. Amos's chest swelled with something between terror and pride. "Tucker, take 5 men and get those cattle back. The rest of you with me." They chased the remaining rustlers into the canyon, but not before one wheeled and fired wild. Amos felt the bullet graze his left arm, hot and sharp. He stayed in the saddle, returned fire, watched the rustler disappear into the rocks. By dawn, they'd recovered the cattle and captured 3 rustlers. The others had fled. Amos's arm throbbed, blood soaking through his shirt. Clara materialized beside him as he dismounted. "You're hit." "It's nothing. It's bleeding. Inside." Now, he didn't argue. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion and pain in its wake. In the kitchen, Clara sat him down and cut away his sleeve with scissors. The bullet had carved a furrow through his bicep, messy but not deep. She cleaned it with whiskey that burned worse than the initial wound, her hands gentle but efficient. "Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Amos asked through gritted teeth. "Trail drives aren't Sunday picnics. James taught me." She wrapped clean bandages around his arm, her face close to his. "Figured I should know how to protect myself. You probably saved our lives. You would have managed." "Clara." She looked up, and their eyes met. This close, he could see gold flecks in her irises, could smell her hair. soap and smoke, and something uniquely her. "Thank you," he said. "You're welcome." Neither moved. The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass. Amos's heart hammered against his ribs. All he'd have to do was lean forward, just a few inches, and Clara pulled back, the spell breaking. "You should rest. I'll bring you something to eat." She fled to the stove, putting distance between them, and Amos felt the loss like a physical thing. But that night, sitting by the fireplace, the walls finally cracked. The ranch was quiet. The hands bunked down, exhausted from the fight. Amos sat in his chair, arm bandaged, staring into the flames. He'd sent Clara to bed hours ago, but he couldn't sleep. Then footsteps on the stairs. Clara appeared in a nightgown and shawl, her red hair loose around her shoulders. "Couldn't sleep either?" "Too much excitement." "Mind if I join you?" He gestured to the other chair. She settled in, tucking her feet beneath her, and they watched the fire together in comfortable silence. Finally, Amos spoke. "I built this whole empire to forget her. Every acre, every head of cattle. Thought if I was successful enough, rich enough, it wouldn't hurt anymore. Did it work? No. Just made me lonely and rich instead of lonely and poor." He turned to look at her. "But then you showed up with your spices and your cornbread, and suddenly I was feeling things I'd buried 17 years ago." Clara's eyes glistened in the firelight. "Amos, I'm terrified," he continued. "Terrified that if I let you in, if I let myself feel again, it'll destroy me. But I'm more terrified of you leaving and taking the warmth with you." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood, crossed to his chair, and held out her hand. He stared at it. That small, work-roughened hand extended in the firelight. "I'm scared too," Clara whispered. "Scared I'll lose someone else I care about. But I think being scared together might be better than being safe and alone." Amos reached up slowly. His fingers trembled. Hers did too. When their hands touched, really touched, skin to skin for the first time, something inside him broke. Or healed. He couldn't tell which. Maybe both. He stood, and they faced each other by the fire, hands clasped, the decades of loneliness melting between them. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Neither do I. Not anymore. We'll figure it out. Together." The kiss happened slowly, tentatively. Just lips pressed to lips, nothing rushed or desperate. Sweet and careful and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Clara was crying. So was he. "Stay," he said. "Not just as my cook. Stay with me." "For how long?" "However long you'll have me." She smiled through her tears. "That might be a very long time, Amos Hargrove." "Good." But the peace shattered 3 days later. One of the captured rustlers, a lean man named Cole, finally started talking under pressure from the sheriff. "Weren't our idea," he said, eyes darting. "Woman hired us. Said she had a score to settle with Hargrove. Knew the ranch layout. Knew which cattle to take. Knew everything." Amos's blood turned to ice. "What woman?" "Didn't give a name. Just described you. Said you owed her. Red-haired lady, real angry about." "I'm red-haired," Clara interrupted quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. She stood in the doorway of the sheriff's office, face pale. "No," Amos said immediately. "Not you." But doubt crept into the sheriff's expression. "Ma'am, where were you before you came to the Lone Spread?" "Amarillo. Wichita before that." "I can prove it." "The woman weren't you," Cole said, studying Clara. "She was older. Had this locket she kept fidgeting with, gold thing with." Amos pulled Sarah May's locket from his pocket. "This locket?" Cole's eyes went wide. "That's the one. How'd you?" Everything clicked into place. The raid's timing, right after Clara arrived. The stolen locket Clara had found, which Amos had thought lost years ago. Sarah May must have broken in, left it as a calling card. "She's trying to destroy everything I built," Amos said slowly. "Hiring rustlers, targeting my herd. She wants revenge because I succeeded when she said I'd fail." The sheriff frowned. "You know who this woman is?" "Sarah May Pritchard." "Well, Sarah May Turner now. Jacob Turner's widow. Turner died last year," the sheriff confirmed. "Left her with debts. Heard she's been scrambling to keep the ranch." So that was it. Jacob had squandered his fortune, died owing money to half of Texas, and Sarah May blamed Amos for not being there to save her. The twisted logic of it made him sick. "We need to find her before she tries again," the sheriff said. Clara stepped forward, her hand finding Amos's. "We'll handle this. Together." The trap was Clara's idea. "She wants to hurt you," Clara said that evening, pacing the ranch house. "Specifically you. Not just steal cattle. She could have done that quietly. She wanted you to know she was behind it. Revenge, Amos agreed. So we give her what she wants. You, vulnerable. Clara's eyes gleamed. We spread word you're hosting a dinner party. Celebration for the new engagement. What engagement? She held up her left hand. A simple band glinted there. His mother's ring, the only jewelry he'd kept. I put it on this morning, Clara said softly. Figured we should make it official if we're doing this. Amos's throat tightened. You're serious? About trapping Sarah May or marrying you? Both. Both. He crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway. They kissed, deep and real, before getting back to planning. The dinner party was set for the following Saturday. Word spread fast. Everyone in 3 counties knew about it within days. Amos Hargrove, the hermit cattle baron, hosting a celebration dinner. Some miracle worker had finally cracked his shell. Sarah May would hear about it. She'd have to respond. The night arrived. Clara cooked a feast, roasted beef, potatoes, vegetables, 3 kinds of pie. The dining room table stretched long beneath lanterns, places set for 20 guests. The hands mixed with neighboring ranchers, everyone dressed in their finest. But Amos and Clara watched the perimeter, waiting. Sarah May came at midnight. She slipped through the back, thinking everyone too drunk to notice. But Amos had posted guards, and Tucker spotted her first. They let her get close, let her enter the kitchen where Clara stood alone, intentionally vulnerable. Well, Sarah May purred, looking older and harder than Amos remembered. The new cook. You're why he's finally crawling out of his cave. Clara didn't flinch. Can I help you, ma'am? You can tell Amos that everything he built should have been mine. That boy I threw away became a king, and I'm left with nothing. Sounds like you made your choice. I made the smart choice. Jacob had money, and squandered it, Amos said, stepping from the shadows. While I built something real. Sarah May spun, her face twisting with rage and something worse, desperation. You should have waited for me. Should have come crawling back. Why would I do that? Because I was the only one who ever loved you. No. Amos moved to stand beside Clara, his hand finding hers. You loved my potential, my desperation, but you never loved me. The sheriff stepped in from the other door, 2 deputies with him. Sarah May Turner, you're under arrest for conspiracy, theft, and attempted cattle rustling. She fought, screaming obscenities and promises of revenge, but they hauled her away into the night. Her voice faded across the grassland until only the wind remained. Amos and Clara stood in the kitchen, hands clasped, breathing hard. It's over, Clara whispered. It's over, he agreed. They married 3 weeks later in the ranch house parlor. Small ceremony, just the hands and a few neighbors. Clara wore a simple dress the color of cream. Amos wore his good suit and his heart on his sleeve. When the preacher said, "You may kiss the bride," Amos took his time, savoring the moment. Clara laughed against his lips, and the sound filled all the empty spaces in his chest. The lone spread changed after that. Clara added curtains, pale yellow ones that caught the morning sun. Rugs appeared, soft beneath worn boots. The kitchen constantly smelled of baking bread and simmering stew. Music floated from the parlor where Clara had installed a piano, her fingers coaxing out melodies in the evening. The hand said the boss smiled now. Actually smiled. Terrifying at first, then reassuring. Like watching winter finally give way to spring. Amos hired more help so Clara didn't have to work so hard. She protested until he explained, "I want you to cook because you love it, not because you have to." She cried at that. Happy tears. Amos was getting better at recognizing the difference. On their 6-month anniversary, Clara told him she was pregnant. Amos dropped the saddle he'd been carrying. Just stood there, stunned, until Clara started laughing. Say something, she prompted. I don't know what to say. Try I'm happy, or that's wonderful, or literally anything other than staring like a landed fish. He crossed to her, sank to his knees, pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. I'm terrified, and overwhelmed, and happier than I have any right to be. That's better. She stroked his hair. We're going to be okay, Amos. Promise. Promise. The baby, a girl with her mother's red hair, arrived in February. They named her Hope. Seemed fitting. Amos held his daughter for the first time and understood, finally, what he'd been missing. Not just love, but purpose beyond revenge. Legacy beyond spite. Clara watched him rock their daughter by the fireplace, and her heart swelled. Worth it? She asked. What? Taking the risk. Trusting again. Amos looked at his wife, his daughter, the home they'd built from broken pieces. Every terrifying moment. Even when I burn the biscuits? You've never burned a biscuit in your life. Give me time. They laughed together as hope slept between them, safe and warm. Years passed. The lone spread thrived. More children came. 2 boys, another girl. The ranch house burst with noise and life and chaos. Amos complained constantly and loved every second. Clara's cooking became legendary. People came from 3 counties away just to taste her pie. She published a cookbook filled with recipes and stories from the frontier. And Amos? Amos learned how to live, how to laugh without feeling guilty, how to love without armor, how to touch and be touched without fear carving holes in his chest. Some nights, he'd stand on that same ridge overlooking his land, Clara beside him now, their hands intertwined. Still love the land? She'd ask. Still love it. But it's not the only thing anymore. What else? He'd kiss her temple. Everything. You gave me everything. The dust still swirled across the lone spread. But now it felt like movement instead of restlessness. Like life instead of survival. Like hope instead of emptiness. And that made all the difference. On Amos's 55th birthday, they hosted a dinner for 100 guests. The ranch house groaned with people and food and laughter. Hope, 17 now, played the piano while her siblings ran wild through the crowds. Neighbors, hands, even the sheriff showed up. Clara stood in her kitchen, their kitchen, surveying the feast she'd prepared. Amos came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "Remember when I almost fired you for being too sassy?" he murmured. "Remember when you stood there like a statue and called my chili adequate? I was an idiot. You were scared. Same thing sometimes." She turned in his arms, looked up at the man who'd learned how to love after swearing it off forever. Gray hair at his temples now, lines deeper around his eyes, laugh lines, finally. "Happy?" she asked, deliriously, even with a house full of chaos? Because of the house full of chaos. They kissed, long and deep, while their children made disgusted noises and their guests cheered. The lone spread wasn't lonely anymore. It was full, abundant, overflowing with the kind of love that takes root in harsh soil and refuses to quit. All because one stubborn man let a red-haired woman with a cast-iron skillet crack his heart wide open. And because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is risk everything they've built for something they never knew they needed. Like hope, like home, like love.